Welcome into the FTN Start Sit Show. This is your host, Jeremy Popielarz. I am here to answer all your start sit questions. Sorry, technical difficulty to start the show there. A little bit in a rush. I'm here in Buffalo, awfully snowy, so getting over that one. All right, let's see. So, all right. We are all set. Technical difficulty is fixed. So we are here. I am here to answer all your questions. Start Sit Show here, brought to you by FTN on FTN's YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber to FTN currently, I suggest getting in there and doing so. We have great tools, even if you're the most seasoned fantasy football player or you're new to fantasy. We have a lot of cool extra tools. We have stat hubs, we have player splits, we have pretty much any fantasy football stat tool you want. We have it. You can go ahead and use it how you wish to make your own decisions and kind of forecast some stuff out into the fantasy landscape. And obviously, you also get full access to the rankings over at FTN Fantasy, which we usually have up early in the week, so you can start making those decisions even sooner. They are also constantly updated all the way up until game time. We also have full access to a Discord channel where you can ask all questions to me, myself, as well as other great FTN analysts that include Scott Spratt, Jeff Radcliffe, Chris Meany, etc. So if you want to go ahead and join that and you're not already a member, feel free to use the promo code POPE, POPE. That will get you 20% off the subscription for the year. So yeah, there it is. That's the spiel. Got to get that out of the way. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, so until we get some questions in here via the YouTube chat, I'm going to go ahead. I do have some on Twitter that I saw from this morning from the earlier post. So we got one here in case this pertains to you if you are listening. We have a Marcus Mariota or Taylor Heineke from Iron Fit PT on Twitter. Second quarterback in super flex. So for me, I'm going Mariota. I really like Mariota's matchup this week. It's not overly easy, but the Bears aren't the most vaunted against the quarterback position. I think that game could get a little bit out of hand. I think that we've seen Justin Fields emerge, and I think the Bears are going to be able to put some points up against Atlanta. In due time, Atlanta will have to keep up with them to an extent. So I do think that Mariota will have a decent week. Taylor Heineke, I like him. He's a little bit more up and down. Mariota's a little bit safer play at your QB too. For me, there, PT. Mark. We also had one from Ian on Twitter. That would be Mooney or Pittman Jr. For me, that one's Michael Pittman. I know he draws a hard coverage / hard matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles this week. And there is some worry, I guess, that defensive line versus their offensive line, forcing Matt Ryan into a hurry a little bit more. Could allude to Paris Campbell having a pretty big day. But I'm leaning still with Michael Pittman there. I do like Darnell Mooney against Detroit, but Detroit's been a little bit better against wide receivers than what would lead on. So I'm going to go with Michael Pittman Jr. there. Dylan on Twitter from earlier also asked, Garrett Wilson or Kadarius Toney? This one's actually way more interesting than we would have thought at the beginning of the season with Toney sitting out for the Giants. But once he's come to Kansas City, in his first couple weeks, they've seen them get involved pretty heavily. Also with the injuries to Juju, Mecole Hardman, there's definitely some opportunity opened up there for Kadarius Toney. I'm going to go with Toney here. I do like Garrett Wilson this week too. We saw him put up 18 points or so against New England the last time that the Jets and the Patriots faced off. So I do think that's repeatable for Garrett Wilson this week. But I think Toney has a little bit higher of an upside. I think he might be able to find the end zone, possibly even a couple times, depending on how that game goes tonight with the Chargers. So I'm going to go Toney here just because I think the upside might be a bit higher. Let's see. We also got Chris Olave or Keenan Allen. So Keenan Allen's coming back off the injury. I think Keenan Allen could have a pretty big week here. I do think he's heavily involved. I think that Justin Herbert will look to him. He's kind of that PPR, that easy reception type of player, opposed to Mike Williams, who's also coming back. Williams is a little bit more of that deep threat, those more or less reliable targets. So for me, I am going to actually go Chris Olave here, and it's very slight. Um, uh, but I do think that Chris Olave has a little bit more of the deep threat. He's a little bit more involved in that offense. We also have Allen coming off a hamstring. And we've seen it. He tried to come back once already, and it kind of hindered him. So I know he's probably much more healthy now a couple weeks later. However, I still am going to go Olave just because of that fact. Keenan Allen could tweak his hammy and they could sit him again. You know what I mean? With Mike Williams back and Joshua Palmer, it's a viable option for them to sub in if Keenan Allen is feeling any injuries. So I'm going to go Olave, just giving Keenan Allen one more week just because of who you have here, K-Gun. I think that Olave will have a good enough week that you're not going to, even if Allen booms, I think Olave can have the same upside. So it's just you're mitigating that injury issues that Allen has, especially with a hamstring that's so easy to tweak at 30 years old. Speaking from experience, just saying. But so Danny's got another one on Twitter here. We have Danny has Curtis Samuel or Elijah Mitchell. I'm going to go Samuel. I just think he's more involved in the offense. I know Elijah Mitchell had a decent running back week in PPR last week, and it seems like him and McCaffrey are going to split more touches than it's going to be McCaffrey's backfield. But it kind of just feels like Curtis Samuel is still decently involved, and I just think the upside's a little bit higher. I think that CMC, if the game gets close, will probably get used a little bit more than Mitchell. And depending on how they play that hot hand. So you're hoping that Elijah Mitchell has a hot hand over CMC, something that I'm not willing to mitigate. So I'm going to go with Curtis Samuel here. It's close for me, but I'm going to favor the wide receiver a little bit here. We also have another one, James Conner or Kenyon Drake versus the Panthers. So it's going to be Conner either way, especially with Benjamin getting cut. They do have Kautini Ingram there behind him at the moment. But I think James Conner's just going to see kind of that workload that we saw last year down the back half of the stretch when Chase Edmonds went down. And just that pure volume made him so fantasy viable. I think that could be something that's in store as we head forward here down the stretch, especially with the team getting a little bit healthier. Murray might be back this week. Hollywood Brown might be back this week. You're just going to open up that defense a little bit more with Hollywood stretching the field, DeAndre Hopkins on the other side, Rondell Moore. A lot of weapons that are starting to come back, and Arizona's getting a little bit healthier. So I do think that James Conner has a little bit more upside than Kenyon Drake, especially because Gus Edwards might be back for the Ravens. So for me, I am going to go James Conner. The workload, based on the workload and the upside. Let's see here. We've got one from Nick Claus on Twitter. Half PPR pick 2, Sutton, Myers, or DJ Moore. Pretty easy for me. It's going to be Sutton, even though the Broncos have been a little bit meh going forward with Russell Wilson thus far this season. But I'm even more worried about Baker Mayfield with DJ Moore. We saw it at the beginning of the season. DJ Moore was pretty much in fantasy purgatory when it came to being able to start him, just because you wanted to. The talent's there. He's great, but it was just Baker just hindered him so much. And unfortunately, I think we might be back at that. PJ Walker really unlocked DJ Moore again. So for me, I'm going to trust Cortland Sutton, who looked okay, especially with no Jerry Jeudy and all the injuries at the Broncos wide receivers. And Jacoby Myers, I think, is a good matchup against the Jets. He had a pretty good game the last time those two played. So I think that could be another one going forward today. So we got one here on YouTube. We got from Brett Thunderstruck. Good morning. It is always a good morning. Very dark here. All my windows are covered by snow. Good old Buffalo. So, ugly choice for my running back 2 full PPR: Hunt, Henderson, or Warren. Thanks. And he says, "Oh, and already playing Najee." Yeah, this team's ugly. I wouldn't say that. Just running back room's a little dicey, but so if you're playing Najee Harris, I necessarily wouldn't play Jalen Warren. Yes, you're guaranteeing yourself all the running back points out of Pittsburgh, but you're also limiting your upside. So I would pick between those two, and obviously it seems like you already really like Najee over Jalen Warren, which isn't terrible. I feel like they're going to be kind of around the same point they were last week in PPR scoring. They're going to be fairly similar. And obviously Najee's a little bit more talented, so I like playing him. However, as far as your second running back goes, I kind of like Kareem Hunt this week. The Bills are going to be missing a couple people on the defensive line. They're missing their middle linebacker and Tremaine Edmonds. And I do think that the Browns are going to be forced to pass a little bit more. But we saw it with the Jets game. We saw that Michael Carter and James Robinson had a big day against this Bills defense. We saw Delvin Cook last week have a big game against this Bills defense. So they started off the season a little bit better against the run, but it seems like they have fallen back into their older tendencies that are allowing a lot of fantasy points and yardage to running backs once again. So I'm going to go Kareem Hunt. I know it seems very meh just because Hunt's been very meh the last 5 weeks or so. But I do think that this could be a week that Kareem Hunt has decent viability. That's where I'm at. I also feel like Henderson's in a pretty heavy committee. For Henderson, it's going to be a touchdown that really makes him fantasy viable. Where I think Kareem Hunt could see it in that full PPR format. He's not going to necessarily need to score. I think you could see some checkdowns and stuff like that from Jacoby Brissett this week to him in the passing game. So that's where I'm going to go for you, Brett. I'm going to go Kareem Hunt, and I like that. I don't think you need to call them ugly. Kareem Hunt and Najee Harris. I'll take that. It's a pretty good running back room. All righty. Let's see what we got here. Got one from Gary on Twitter. Full PPR starting: JT, Kamara, Cooper, Moore, Pierce, Campbell. Benches: Drake, Johnson, Thielen. Any changes? Was thinking of Drake for Campbell or Amari Cooper, since Cooper's on the road isn't so great. It is pretty wild that Amari Cooper splits between the road and his home. Stats are that different. For an NFL player, it's pretty wild that is the case. But I get it. I get the issue that you might want to go ahead and do that. Personally, I'm not. I get the allure of Kenyon Drake just because of his big game that he had just before their bye week. But he's really dependent on volume, and that's kind of how the Ravens running backs roll is who's going to get the volume that week and who's going to score the touchdowns. That's really where it comes from. So if Gus is active, which I am expecting, Drake, I think, is going to see a drop. I think Gus is going to be their red zone guy over Drake. So for me, I'm not making that move. I think Amari Cooper could have a pretty big day. The Bills are reeling at the moment. Their defense is hurt. I don't know 100% if they're getting Trey White back, but they are most likely missing both their safeties again. They might be missing Kaiir Elam, their first-round pick. The secondary, the defense is pretty banged up at the moment, and the Browns are going to have to throw to keep up with the Bills. We even saw it in the past. The Jets kind of did a little bit of a good job on the defensive side to kind of be able to run the ball a little bit more on them, but I do think that Cooper's going to have a decent day. So I wouldn't make that move personally. I think that Cooper's a little bit higher. Drake for Campbell, a little bit closer just because of the matchup, but I'm still going to roll with Campbell. I think the upside's a little bit higher there, Gary. So for me, I'm not making any changes here. I just think that your upside's pretty good where you're at there. Brett, one more. Oh, hey, look, I just found out I can put users in timeout. That's pretty cool. Don't know what it does, but one more for Brett. Half PPR, Pittman or Cooper? Oh, so we're just talking about him. Oof. So I do have these guys back to back. Okay. As far as my rankings go, I cannot find what window they're in. Um, there, those aren't them. Sorry, Brett. Give me a sec. Technical difficulties. All right, there we go. Yeah, so I have them 17 and 18. Slight edge to Michael Pittman. But I'm probably going to flip that, to be honest. I'm going to give it to Cooper. So I would say start Cooper. I know that it's a tough matchup against the Bills, but the Eagles aren't much better. And I just think that the route for Michael Pittman to be very viable is that he's going to have a big play here or there. And I think the Eagles are going to limit that, where I think Amari Cooper is going to find that little bit of a niche, the underneaths kind of area, where I think he'll get that quick in and out because they're going to try and get the ball out quick. The Bills' offensive line or defensive line is pretty quick to the football with Von Miller and the pack of Ed Oliver, etc. Getting to the quarterback has kind of become their niche. So I think that Cooper's going to see a little bit more volume on those underneath type kind of in and out, get the ball out quick type plays, where Michael Pittman's really their field stretcher. And I don't know if Matt Ryan's going to have time to do that against this Philly defense. So I'm going to go Cooper here for you, Brett. Hopefully it works out. Both tough matchups, so I apologize if it doesn't. If you like Michael Pittman, go with him. Like I said, I have him back to back. I really think you could coin flip this and probably have a good shot at picking the right one, to be honest. That's just how close they are for me. No problem, Brett. That is what I am here for, to try and aid you in your decisions. Let's see here. Let's see if we got, until we get some more here on the tube, let's see what we got here on Twitter. We got one here from Cameron, Craig Cameron. PPR flex, Nico Collins or DeAndre Swift. And this is going to sound crazy to many if you go on a name value, but I'm actually going to go Nico Collins here. It's against the Commanders. He's been kind of trending towards taking over that lead role, it seems like, over Brandon Cooks, at least in the target area. So I'm going to go with Nico Collins here. I think he could find the end zone and have a decent day. I don't think he's going to blow us away. But DeAndre Swift isn't really seeing the red zone touches. It's kind of going to Jamal Williams. DeAndre Swift just isn't healthy. His elusiveness isn't there that we've seen in the past. He's not breaking as many tackles. He's hurt. He's playing hurt, and it's pretty noticeable as far as the output goes. So the Lions are leaning on Jamal Williams, which he's been doing well for them. So no issue there. So I just feel like Collins is a little bit more upside, as sad as that sounds. DeAndre Swift, if he was healthy, it's an obvious Swift over Collins, but just at the moment, DeAndre Swift isn't healthy, and it's obvious, and it's become pretty easy for me to sit DeAndre Swift as of late, which is sad because I had a lot of hopes for him coming in this season, but the injuries will do that to you. Let's see here. So we got one here from Zakita, full PPR. Pick 2. Cortland Sutton, Chris Olave, Mike Williams, or Allen Robinson. Oof. Man, 4 weeks ago, we'd be like, oh, God, this is easy. But Allen Robinson has kind of opened up into a real good opportunity, unfortunately, with Cooper Kupp's injury. So makes it a little bit tougher here for me, but I'm definitely starting Chris Olave. Okay. He's a lock for me. I have him as a top 10 guy this week, as does many, as the consensus rankings, even at FTN and the ECR, wherever you look. Olave is pretty much a top 12 guy this week. The Rams seem like a tough matchup, but they've actually been pretty easy to wide receivers. So definitely plug Olave in. And then after that, I would say I'm going to go Cortland Sutton. Just because I think he sees the volume this week a little bit more than these other two. Mike Williams has the upside, the big playability, but Keenan Allen's also coming back. So it's not like Mike Williams is coming back and Allen's still out, where then I would lean Mike Williams because he's going to see most of the target share. But with Allen and Williams both returning at the same time, I think that Mike Williams is going to fall into that late wide receiver 2 window. Cortland Sutton, I think, is a little bit more in the middle of that wide receiver 2 area. So that's where I'm going to go with him. And Olave would be my 2. All right, Sakita. But again, if you want to go Mike Williams, I don't hate that. It's a good matchup against the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Really, I would go that way. I'm still avoiding Allen Robinson. I know the opportunity's there, but I want to give it some time. Let's see how Tyler Higbee, they like Skoranek. Van Jefferson's back. So I'm not sold on giving Allen Robinson the reins just yet. So Sutton, Olave, lock him in. Hopefully it works out for you. I'll be rooting for those 2 for you. All right. Twitter, Kevin Wheeler has one. It is Mike Williams. More. I'm going to assume that could be 3 of them. So I'm not sure. But Mike Williams, Moore, Sutton, and Tony. We're going to hold off on this one, and we're going to ask Kevin which more it is, because that makes a big difference. There's too many of them. Let's see here. Alex has one on Twitter. Kadarius Toney, Gabe Davis, Cortland Sutton, Darius Slayton. Need 2 wide receivers. Then he needs, and that's a full PPR. So that's going to be 2 wide receivers out of that would be, for me, I'm going to go Toney and Gabe Davis and shoot that upside. Yeah, I think Toney has a big day. He's going to be highly involved in that Kansas City offense with no Juju or Hardman. Gabe Davis, we saw, kind of came alive a little bit last week. I could see that again this week for the Bills. I think that they're going to obviously feed Diggs, but I think the Bills are going to have to start spreading the ball around a little bit more they're kind of in a funk, and to kind of get out of that, I think you could see Davis see a little bit more on the target share. I think he could hit for a big one today. So I'm going to go with those 2. Cortland Sutton is also a decent start. If you want a safer play. And then he also has half PPR, pick 1, Darrell Henderson, Jalen Warren, or McKinnon. And that one, I'm going to take Henderson. I just think he's a little bit more involved this week. He might find the end zone. They're kind of all those low end RB2s or RB3s kind of range. Low RB2, high end RB3. So I'm not sold on any of them, but if I had to pick, it's going to be Darrell Henderson. Out of that, we got another one on Twitter from Chad. We got Jamal Williams, Deontay Foreman, James Conner, Deebo Samuel, start 3. So Deebo is a must start for me. I know he had a down week, but I think Deebo is still one of their better wide receivers. I think you could still see that. We had talked about James Conner just a bit ago. So he's going to be another guy that's a must start for me here. And then it's going to be Jamal Williams. I had mentioned it when I just talked about Swift. I think that Jamal Williams is second right now, or he's tied for the league lead in goal line touches. He's seeing most of, if not all of the work inside the red zone, depending on the game for the Lions. The Lions offense is also somewhatly putting up a decent performances. So for me, I do think that Jamal Williams finds the end zone today, and I do think that he's a decent start. Deontay Foreman obviously has seen the volume the last couple of weeks and been a viable fantasy asset, and been even more than viable. I mean, he's been one of the top running backs in the league in the last 4 or 5 weeks, week in and week out. But this week he draws a very tough matchup in Baltimore. They've gotten better as of late, but I don't think that Carolina's offense is going to move the ball as much as we think against this Ravens defense. So I'm a little bit down on Foreman this week. So I'm definitely going to take Jamal Williams, who I think definitely has a better chance to score a touchdown this week. We also got one. Would you play Gallup or someone below? I don't think I can trust Marquise playing, and don't trust Gallup. So then he gives me a list of Landry, Skoranek, McKenzie, Hollins, Watson, Parker, Osborne. I'm honestly not. I like Gallup. I think here. I know we saw Gabe Davis kind of have a pretty big game against the Minnesota Vikings as the secondary wide receiver. I think that could continue for Gallup. I mean, he's going to obviously your secondary to CD Lamb there in Dallas. So I do lean Michael Gallup here over this list of who he has or an option to pick up. So, especially because, like I said, we just saw Davis have a pretty big game. Let's see what else we got here. Doesn't look like we have. Let's see. Do we have anything? Let's see. Sit one out of these. PPR running back. Do they bench? Deontay Foreman, Cordell Patterson, or Swift? Um, mm, oh, I think I'm going to bench Foreman. It's really close. Foreman and Swift. I have them very close because, again, I think Foreman struggles against this Baltimore defense. I don't think he's going to have the holes that he's had against these couple blow up games have come against a little bit softer matchups. Um, and I think Swift could have, oh man, that's really close. Yeah, I'm gonna bench Foreman. I know it's a little bit more wild and crazier side of it. I don't think that it's gonna be the consensus side there. A lot of people do like Foreman, but I just think that he struggles against this Baltimore defense. They aren't the most vaunted Baltimore defense that we've seen in the past from these Ravens, but they've gotten better. Roquan Smith is a big add for them in the middle. That was kind of their weak point when it came to stopping the run was the middle linebackers. Patrick Queen necessarily was a decent running back or wide or wow, decent linebacker, but he wasn't overly physical. He overran some stuff at times. He wasn't the best. And I know that he's still playing there for them. Um, but Roquan Smith slotted in next to him only helps that defense that much better against running backs. Um, and like I said, on paper, when you're going to look at it right now, the Baltimore Ravens to this point in the season, they have given up. Ooh, where are they? they've only averaged 21.6 points to running backs in PPR scoring. So it's like middle of the pack, a little bit towards the bottom half, but it's been getting better the last couple weeks. So for me, I'm going to avoid Deontay Foreman this week. Even if it costs playing an injured Swift, I really think that's a better option just because I think the upside's higher. I think DeAndre Swift could take maybe a play to the end zone where I don't think you're going to see that from Deontay Foreman. So we got another one here on Twitter. Would you play both Higley and Hurst in tight end premium and bench DJ Moore? Ooh. This is going to sound wild, but yeah, I would. It sounds crazy, but I like Hurst this week. No Jamar Chase again against Pittsburgh. I think that could be a good matchup. He had a pretty good game against them the first time these two teams played. And he didn't even find the end zone, and he was still a decent player. I mean, he had, I believe, it was about 9 points or so. Nothing crazy, but I do think he could find the end zone, and it's tight end premium, so he's going to get a little bit extra bonus there than DJ Moore. And I think Higbee's heavily involved. I know it's the Saints. I know that I even have him ranked not as like a fringe tight end one, but I don't think that I don't think that he's going to get outscored by DJ Moore. So I'm going to roll both those tight ends. This just in too on Twitter. Looks like Gus Edwards is inactive. So I don't remember. Was it on here? No, it might have been on Twitter. So if you do have Kenyon Drake is probably a pretty good start going forward today. Gus Edwards was the big factor for me to fade Kenyon Drake. With him officially inactive, I'd fire up Kenyon Drake. We got one on here from Bobby. Who would I sit PPR, Chubb or Jacobs? I'm gonna go Jacobs. Nick Chubb, he's gonna fall into that 6, 7, maybe 10 range there in the PPR scoring just because he doesn't see the passing volume. But I'd mentioned it a little bit earlier. The Bills' defense is reeling a little bit, and they're going to be missing Tremaine Edmonds, who makes some pretty big plays in the run game. The main guy is, I'm trying to blank. Matt Milano. Man, that was bad. But I'm trying to blank on Matt Milano's name. But Matt Milano's the guy who makes a lot of plays there. But we saw it against the Jets. I mean, we saw Michael Carter and we saw James Robinson both have pretty big days. We saw Delvin Cook have a big day last week. So I do think Nick Chubb's in store for a pretty big week. I think he's going to be right around his average. Jacobs could have another decent week. I do like both of them. So if you do prefer Josh Jacobs just because he's going to see a little bit more passing work, I don't hate that play. But the Denver defense is a little bit stouter against the run than the Bills. So I'm going to still roll Nick Chubb there. Even though I'm sure, Bobby, you're really thinking, maybe the game script where Hunt might play a little bit more with the Bills. But I'm still going to roll Chubb because if they get the red zone, I think Chubb's going to be able to one on who's going to pound the rock in. So I'll go Chubb still. Let's see here. Let's see here. Doesn't look like we've got any other questions on Twitter or on YouTube. So let's check the other inactives here. that list up. We'll go over that because it looks like some are rolling in, obviously, possibly, unless Fields is inside. Yep. So we do have some. All right. So the Ravens, obviously, like we'd mentioned, Gus Edwards is out. So if you are watching, Kenyon Drake is pretty much a must start, probably in a flex position, depending on how deep your leagues are or your roster. But Kenyon Drake, good start with Gus Edwards out. But Mark Andrews is active, so Isaiah likely becomes most likely irrelevant again. So that's good news. Andrews and Drake should be a big one. We got a question here. We'll go to that first before we continue the inactives. So Blurpy has Olave or Tony at flex this week. I'm starting Kamara too. So I have Olave ranked inside the top 12, as do many people. I like the matchup against the Rams. I think that he could have a pretty big day. I do also think Tony could have a big day. You are saying you're starting Kamara as well. So I'm still fine starting Olave. You're not starting two players in the same position from the same team. That's where I get a little bit more into the I don't really want to roll that way. But with a running back and a wide receiver, I'm fine with that. I think Olave has shown that he can take a couple big plays and have a good day. He doesn't necessarily need to score. So even if he has the big plays, Kamara gets in the end zone. I think both those guys are a good start against the Rams. So I'm going to go that route. Like I said, I do think Tony could have a big day. He's just a little bit more risky for me with Kadarius Toney. I know he's going to have a pretty big opportunity, but I just don't know if his upside's as high as Chris Olave's this week. Still high. I have him as a mid wide receiver too. So a viable start, Blurpy, if you prefer Tony to Olave, but I lean Olave. Vito has one on here as well. Tyler Algier, Jalen Warren, or Kyron Williams. So I'm not as in on Kyron Williams as many of my other probably esteemed colleagues out there in the Twitter world or the fantasy world. I don't know if he's going to be highly involved. I think we're just going to see a lot of Kyron Williams. You're going to see some Cam Akers. You're going to see some Darrell Henderson. It's going to be just a fantasy mess. And you're just guessing for the guy who's going to find that end zone. And I'm not willing to risk that with your other options that you have here. I think Tyler Algier is a good start. Chicago is not the best against the run. I know CPAT's involved as well, but we've even seen it. Algiers had a good day with CPAT involved, as well as we've seen Caleb Huntley have some good run since CPAT's come back. So I'm going to go Algier here. Jalen Warren's interesting, but he's still battling with Najee Harris, who's a little bit up and down. So I'm just going to go Algier just because I think that he might have a little bit more touches today. Vito, you also have Jahan Dotson or Josh Palmer. I'm going to go Dotson. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen make Josh Palmer almost irrelevant again. Jahan Dotson hasn't had the best comeback since his injuries, and he's very touchdown dependent, but he's looked good. He's had the ability to find the end zone a little bit more than Palmer this season, so I'm going to go with Dotson. They're both risky, but I think Dotson could be a little bit more involved than we see Palmer. If you play Palmer, you're hoping, which we don't want, but the only way Palmer I see having viability would be if Keenan Allen tweaks his hammy or they kind of don't use him as much to avoid that injury. So I'm still going to roll Jahan Dotson though. What's your thoughts on Rams wide receivers? It's going to be really messy. And it's going to take a week or two for us to really figure that out. I think. I mean, it's obvious to me that you would think Allen Robinson's going to lead the way, but I think Ben Skoranic's a name that's probably underneath the radar a little bit. They liked him a lot early on in the season. We were complaining that he was getting targets over Allen Robinson early on, so I think Skoranic's a name to watch. If he's out on your waiver wire and you got a dead space at the end of your roster, somebody that's really not startable for you, or you just kind of are hoping happens, he might be worth a blip and grab him, just because I think that he could be sneaky. Van Jefferson's going to see your deep targets. I don't think his role is really going to change. But I think Skoranek could kind of take over that Cooper Kupp role. He's not going to become Cooper Kupp by any means. He's not going to give you those points, but I think he's the closest that they have left to what Cooper Kupp can do that he can do as well. So I really like Skoranek as a sneaky kind of ad this week if he's still available on your waiver wire. So that helps you. I think that's kind of where you're going to go. I think Robinson sees some targets to be viable, but he's not a guy I'm actively starting this week unless I have to. And I mean, I have rosters that I have to, and I'm sure there's people out there that are in that same boat. I think he's a decent flex, but I'm not actively trying to get any of these guys really into my lineup. Tyler Higbee, on the other hand, is a guy I'm trying to. I don't know if he's going to have a huge week because New Orleans is really good against tight ends, but I think he could be extremely targeted just because he's kind of the only guy that's still there that they've liked in their target share. And you're welcome. We got one from Nahel. I don't know if I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Half PPR, flex, Pacheco, Tony, Gus Edwards, or Brian Robinson. So Edwards is inactive. So Gus Edwards, we're going to toss out of there. And I'm going to go Tony. I know that Robinson and Pacheco are two hot names. They've kind of been like, oh, they're coming. They're really ground and pound type guys. They're not really seeing a ton of fantasy points unless they find the end zone. And honestly, Antonio Gibson's a better fantasy asset than Brian Robinson at the moment out of that Commander's backfield. So I'm going to go Tony. I think the upside's huge this week. No Juju, no McCole Hardman. And we already saw Tony score last week against the Giants. So I think in a game that's going to be a little bit more, hopefully, of what we've been hoping for out of this AFC West, which is kind of a shootout. I think Tony's pretty heavily involved and could have a pretty big week. So I'm going to go Tony over Pacheco. I don't think that they're going to try and run necessarily on the Chargers. I think they'll be fine just throwing the ball up there. So take Tony. I think he has the biggest upside. Alrighty. Let's continue the inactives. We got through Baltimore. The Bills, Tremaine Edmonds, like I mentioned, AJ Klein, a guy they just brought in, Greg Rousseau, Tre'Davious White, Kaiir Elam. So again, it looks like they are getting Jordan Poyer back, but they're missing White and Kaiir Elam. Corners are definitely reeling there in Buffalo. So again, Mari Cooper, I do think he could have a pretty big day. I know this Bills defense is tough, but they've been struggling. And like I said, I think in due time, they're going to get back there in that pass defense. But right now, Greg Rousseau off the edge is a big miss. Now you don't have Elam. Now you don't have Trey White still hasn't come back. So your starting corners Mari Cooper can make some space for himself there. So I still like him as a start. That's more the biggest takeaway from the Bills inactives. Trey S has one morning. Top of the morning to you. Full PPR start 2, Singletary, Zeke, Michael Carter, or Eli Mitchell. Thanks and good luck today. I'm going to need a lot of luck, Trey. A lot of my teams are just injury-ridden, so I appreciate that, and I hope your good luck helps me, and I hope that my advice will help you. But my two that I'm going to start here is going to be Michael Carter. I know it's a little bit tougher matchup on paper with the Patriots, but the Bills were a tougher matchup for Michael Carter. Had a good day. I do think that he could see a little bit of that PPR usage. I think the Jets are a little bit better than people think, and they're pretty good at running the football. Michael Carter runs that zone scheme really well, and I think that he could have a decent day. As far as the rest go, you're really dicey. I don't like Singletary as much as I did last week. The matchup's not great for the Browns' run game with this Bills offensive line. So I'm not loving that. I'd honestly probably roll Zeke. I know he's meh, but if they get in the red zone, he's going to get the touches, and he's probably going to score a touchdown. So that's probably where I'd go. I'd go Zeke and Michael Carter. And not get too fancy here. Eli Mitchell splitting with CMC scares me. I think that if they want to go a hot hand approach, CMC is going to have that over Mitchell. And like I said, I don't love the Browns matchup for Singletary, so I'm going to go Zeke and Michael Carter here for you, Trey. Nell also has, what do I do with Keenan Allen? Do I wait and see if he's active or start Melvin Gordon at PPR? I don't know who else you have on your bench. I don't know if there's a guy that you could go out or even on waivers. Like if there's a guy you could add in case Keenan Allen's inactive because you have a significant drop off here in my point of view. I think Keenan Allen's almost a top 12 wide receiver this week if he plays, just because he's going to be heavily involved. Because if he plays, he's healthy. That's the way I look at it. If the team doctor is going to clear him, then he's healthy. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so if the team doctor says he's good to me. So I would say then Melvin Gordon's not anything fancy this week. Everybody's on a bye for him. Chuba, yeah. It's tough because you don't want to take that 0. I get that. Man. I feel like this is going to be, it's kind of one of those that you're going to have to like sit with yourself. Are you fine with taking a 0 if Keenan Allen's inactive? Like I'm not, so I would probably start Melvin Gordon. Yeah, and then on waivers, they're saying Mac Hollins, Nico Collins, Gallup. Yeah, they're all pretty bad too. Let's do this quick. Let's see. Not checked. Let's see if I can find. See what they've said. Yeah, I don't see too much on what they've said anything or if anything about Keenan Allen. This is tough because Keenan Allen's just so good this week if he plays. I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna have to leave this one up to you. I mean, I would probably start Gordon just because I want the points. I think he could have a decent week, but we're talking like 8 or 9 points in comparison to Keenan Allen, who could see 20. So big drop off. But if you definitely don't want a 0, I would just play Melvin Gordon. It sounds way less attractive, and I don't love it, but I mean, that's a boat you're in. Just because he's coming off an injury, it's hard, and it being an 8 o'clock game, we're not going to hear anything from the team for a while. So I would say probably just go Melvin Gordon. Ryan, non PPR. Should I start Carter or Ayuk at flex? Assuming, is that Michael Carter, Ryan? I'm assuming it is, but I don't want to assume in case I'm wrong. So, Ryan, I will wait for that answer. Could be DeAndre Carter. No. Now that's a move I would do. I'd pick up DeAndre Carter if you have somebody on your bench to drop, and I would wait for Keenan Allen. And if Allen's inactive, I would play DeAndre Carter 100%. I like that move much better than just plugging in Gordon, in my opinion. Ryan says, yes, it is Michael Carter. So I'm going to go Ayuk here. I'm ranked pretty high in my wide receiver rankings this week. Mid wide receiver 2. Michael Carter's a low end RB2. So I think that Carter could have a decent day, but I think Ayuk could find the end zone. I feel like he's kind of becoming the guy there. Not necessarily the guy, but like outside of George Kittle, with all the talent that's around there, it's hard to judge on who's going to see the target share, but it kind of seems like Debo draws the better coverage. Ayuk has just been phenomenal lately as far as running routes and just getting open. So I do like Ayuk this week, so I'm going to go with him there. And the non-PPR really just doesn't make Carter that viable to me. I could see where James Robinson coming off a bye has a little bit more work in that red zone. You will has Josh Allen or DFS. I'm not sure. What's DFS? Are you talking about like DFS as in daily fantasy? Oh, or Fields. Gotcha. I'm actually going Justin Fields here. Josh Allen's been a little bit down the last couple weeks. I mean, he could definitely turn it around. I mean, there's no saying he can't. He has the talent to do it. But Justin Fields against Detroit's just really juicy. I think that he's going to see a lot of the running again, and that's what's kind of holding Fields up there. Josh Allen against the Browns, a little bit tougher matchup. Kind of been a little gunslinger like with the football. Could see some turnovers. I just think Fields has a little bit higher ceiling. We've seen it the last couple weeks, and especially with Josh Allen with a little bit of a bum arm and kind of just an offense that's not really clicking right now against a tougher defense. So I'm going to go Fields. Also, especially if it is DFS, I mean, Fields probably is cheaper. I haven't really checked on DraftKings yet. I usually make my lineup after the show, so I don't know where he's at. But I would take Fields if he's a little bit cheaper in a DFS format. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. We got some on Twitter here. We'll go through these quick until we see if anything pops up here on YouTube. Superflex, need the best one. Swift, Dalton, or McCoy? Avoid Colt McCoy. I'm still going to roll Swift. I know he's injured. He's kind of hobbled, but I don't love Andy Dalton. I guess if you like Olave, you got to kind of like Dalton as well. But I think DeAndre Swift could still have a decent day. But yeah, I'd go probably Swift or Dalton there. So Kevin got back to us. So need to non-PPR, Mike Williams, Rondell Moore, Cortland Sutton, or Tony. So I'm going to go Tony and Sutton here. I think. I think that those two have the highest chance to score touchdown in the non-PPR. That's kind of what you're shooting for there, in my opinion. So that's where I'm going to go. Let's see. Anything else on here? Doesn't look like it. Let's see here. Does not look like I got. Oh, I do have one here. Van Jefferson or Drake London in flex. Okay. This is closer than you would think, I think. I don't love Drake London. So here's the issue with Drake London is that Drake London's floor is really low. So Drake London had a decent game last week. And why did he have a decent game? Because he scored a touchdown. Without that touchdown, he's kind of like a low end wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, just because there's no real passing volume in that Atlanta offense, and you're splitting it between him. Khalil Hodge has decent games. I mean, you've got Zacchaeus, you've got Kyle Pitts. Like, there's not a ton of volume to go around. Van Jefferson, on the other hand, I think could see a little bit more work. But his targets aren't as catchable. Also against the New Orleans defense. I'm gonna roll London here still. I do think that maybe he has a better shot of scoring a touchdown, in my opinion. So that's where I'm going to go. I think Jefferson needs that big play that I don't know if he's going to get against the Saints defense. So I'm going to go ahead and go London on the basis that I think he might be able to find the end zone, in turn giving you a little bit of a better week there, Bryce. So let's see here. All right, Julio has full PPR, Claypool or Gallup. Ooh, this one's gonna make me think. I like this one. Um, okay. So Claypool, pretty easy matchup against Atlanta. Um, so I don't necessarily hate the matchup. And I think it's a good matchup. But I don't necessarily think that he's overly involved. I think he's going to be involved a little bit more this week, but I think that's where Darnell Mooney could come in and kind of see a little bit of a bigger workload than Claypool. And again, there's not a lot of passing volume in this Bears offense. I mean, we might think that because Fields is having these big games and these big fantasy points, but they're coming through his legs. So there's still not a ton of passing volume for this passing attack here. So it's really only one guy who can have that volume. So for me, I'm going to actually go Michael Gallup. Okay. We saw Gabe Davis have a pretty big game against Minnesota as the secondary wide receiver last week. And I think that could be the case again this week. I think CD Lamb gets his own, just like Diggs did, but I do think that Gallup could have a decent game. And I have him ranked as a wide receiver 3. Or a wide receiver 4, actually. So it's not like a huge day, but I also have Claypool at just barely squeaking into the top 50 this week. I just don't know how involved he's really going to be still. Also, there's just not a ton of volume there. So outside of him scoring a touchdown, I don't think he's going to have a lot of points. I think Gallup's going to be a little bit more involved. I think that Minnesota is going to give that Dallas team a run. I mean, just like they did to the Bills last week. So I think you could see a lot of points scored there. And I think CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, Tony Pollard, and Zeke could all have decent days. I think Dallas and Minnesota could have some pretty productive fantasy players out of that realm. So I'm going to go Gallup. I want in on that game ultimately. So I'll take Gallup there for you, Julio. Let's see here. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. So we're going to roll over to the inactive. So we only made it to the Bills. So we're going to go here to the and Julio, you are welcome. So we've got the Panthers, nothing surprising, nothing really viable. The Bears, they are missing 2 corners, but doesn't really change too much for me there. Lions, Josh Reynolds is inactive again. Nothing overly exciting there. The Texans, so Benjamin is inactive in his first week there. Breven Jordan inactive, and Amari Rodgers inactive. Stingley is going to be inactive. So nothing crazy. Let's see here. Nothing crazy in Indy. Same in New England. Is pretty chalk. Saints, Ingram's out. No surprise. Giants, nothing surprising. Jets, Corey Davis. Other than that, some corners. Patriots could have, receivers could have a pretty decent day. Some corners missing there. Yeah. So as far as the inactives go for the 1 o'clock window, nothing overly surprising. Like I said, I mean, obviously Gus Edwards was the biggest one. So that kind of puts you in the wheels up on Kenyon Drake. Benjamin gives you a chance to have, Sexy Rexy if you want for another week as possibly a deep target to try and, have a flex guy that has some upside on a game script basis. So let's see here. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions on YouTube yet. If you are in the chat and you have any other questions, toss them in there. Be happy to help. Doesn't even have to be start sit. I mean, that's what we're here for. But, trade question, shoot it in there. Let's check back on Twitter. Let's see here. Craig Cameron has a good one. Njoku or Schultz? I'm actually going to go Dalton Schultz again. I think it's one of those things that it's the volume in this game. I think Minnesota. Um, um, I mean, the Bills and Browns could get high scoring too, but I think Minnesota Dallas gets a little bit more high scoring, and I want pieces in my lineup from this game. So that's where I'm going to go. I do still like Njoku as a decent option this week. So depending on other tight ends, I would go that route. But for me, it's still um, um, I like Schultz a little bit better. Let's see here. Yeah, Will has thoughts on Jay Taylor. Um, I like Jonathan Taylor. I think that he's just getting a little bit more healthy. This week, I think he could have another pretty decent game. I know the Eagles are a good defense, but we just saw Washington run all over them with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, who good in their own right, aren't as good as Jonathan Taylor. The talent's just not there. I think that we could see a pretty decent game from Jonathan Taylor. I'm not going to say it's going to be a huge game. I have him ranked as a running back one. I do think he gets there. Um, Possibly a top five guy. He's right on the fringe for me. So I could see him getting it done. It's really just going to depend on if he finds the end zone or not. And I think that could be a chance. I think that Saturday has these guys. A former offensive lineman kind of says, "Hey, let's get these offensive linemen moving. Let's get them blocking downhill. Let's ease up here and help them out a little bit. Let's pound it with JT, and it's working. I know it wasn't the toughest matchup last week. It's going to be a little bit tougher this week, but I do think he could have a decent day. You will. Um, and going forward, I think he's going to be a good asset, kind of return back to what we were hoping for when we drafted him, probably first overall this year. Um, let's see here. We got Angel Serrano has one. Jamal Williams or Singletary half PPR. Okay, so I talked about it a little bit earlier. I don't love the matchup for Singletary this week. I think the Browns are going to be a little bit better defensively than Minnesota was on the run. So for me, I think it's going to be Jamal Williams here. I think that he's a guy that is going to see good usage again, especially in the red zone. Leads the NFL in red zone goal line touches. He's up there in red zone touches in general as well. So for me, I'm in on Jamal Williams. I think that he could find the end zone today. Devin Singletary, not so much. I don't know if he finds the end zone this week, which will make him kind of meh for fantasy. So I'm going to go Jamal Williams there for you, Angel. You will has Taylor or Diggs in DFS. Hmm. Hmm. I'm going to go Taylor. I think Taylor has a little bit bigger day. Um, I do like Stephon Diggs. And I think he has a decent day, but I think Taylor could find the end zone multiple times where Diggs not so much, um, if at all, to be honest. I mean, Diggs might, um, most likely will, but I do think Taylor could have a pretty big day. Taylor to me is Taylor's upside's RB1 this week. Diggs, I don't think has wide receiver one built into his upside this week, just because the Browns defense is a little bit better, and the way that Allen's been struggling a little bit as of late. So I'd go Taylor. It also, I feel like Taylor's going to be. I could be wrong. I mean, like I said, I haven't looked through the DFS stuff, but I feel like Taylor might be a guy that's rostered a little bit less than Diggs. I think Diggs could be a popular play, especially with them moving the game to Detroit, where it's in a dome. Everybody's getting all amped up about it. Taylor against Philly on paper doesn't look great. People might avoid that matchup, so I could go. I don't mind that. Let's see here. Angel has another question. Kadarius Toney this week. I like Toney. Let's see exactly because I don't want to misspeak here. But I do have him pretty high in my wide receiver ranks. I want to get you the exact position because I don't know it off the top of my head. Okay, so I have him at 22. So he's just behind Cortland Sutton, ahead of Darnell Mooney and Mike Williams. I think with the lack of options there, with Juju missing, as well as McCole Hardman sent to the IR. We saw him get involved more last week. So I think that we could see that same trend happen again this week. And I do think Toney's a lock almost for a touchdown. I do think that he gets into that high end wide receiver rankings. At least top 24 feels pretty safe for me on him this week. So I'm in on Toney. I'm starting him over a lot of players. You know what I mean? Like I said, so I have him at 22. So there's not many people ahead of him. So I like him, Angel. Let's see. We got a defensive question from Danny on Twitter. So we got Dallas or San Francisco D. I'm going to go San Francisco. Especially with especially the fact that I know Kyler Murray is still a little bit questionable. If they get Colt McCoy, that San Francisco defense is going to eat him alive on Monday Night Football between sacks and turnovers. So I'm all in for that. And like I said, I think the Dallas Minnesota game could kind of turn into a little bit of a track race. Not always the best for defenses. I mean, yeah, they could get some turnovers in there. But it's not going to look great if Minnesota puts up 30 or 40 points on them like they did the Bills. So I'm going to avoid that game defensively. So that's where I'll go San Francisco. Let's see here. Alrighty. Let's see here. Doesn't look like we got any more questions on Twitter. We are rolling in on the 12:15 mark. So we'll probably hang out for another 15 minutes or so. Pop on out of here 12:30. So until then, if you want to hang out, I'm going to go over article I write every Friday. So it's the FTN rankers versus the ECR. Oh, Tootsie Pop is in the house. Well, let's answer that question because no one cares about articles, right? Who reads anymore? Anyways, what's up, Tootsie Pop? Singletary, Pacheco, Patterson, Boyd, D Hop, questionable. Thielen, Mike Williams, questionable. Need one running back, two wide receivers. CPAT has both designations on this platform. Man, I want to know what platform you're playing on because that is great. I loved when he had both designations. Now he's stuck as a running back in most of my rosters. Ugh. All right, so CPAT's a must start for me. I like him this week. Chicago was pretty leaky against the running backs. I know he's kind of in a timeshare there, but Atlanta's going to run the ball. They love to do it. Arthur Smith's pounded it in his head that that's his route to winning football games. Nothing against him because he's doing it. So CPAT for me for sure. So whether you want to play him in, I'd probably play him running back. Avoiding Pacheco and Singletary this week, I think they could have some decent days on the ground. I just don't think they find the end zone, which really kind of makes them meh for fantasy. There's no real upside there. I like Tyler Boyd, so I'm going to say definitely start him against Pittsburgh. I think that game could be pretty good in his favor. And then I'm going to go DeAndre Hopkins. Since Hopkins come into the league after his suspension, he actually averages the highest finish of any wide receiver thus far in full PPR scoring. He averages a 10.75, and that's obviously only since week 7. So there's only 4 games in the sample size, but he has yet to finish below wide receiver 21. And then he was second to Cooper Kupp, obviously, until his injury, which kind of put a damper on his overall because he has a designation way low in his injury week. But yeah, so far he hasn't finished outside the top 24 in 4 straight weeks. And last week he was a wide receiver 12 with Colt McCoy at the helm. So no matter the quarterback, D-Hop's still a good option. And I'm not necessarily worried about Marquise Brown coming back there. So I'm probably going to roll those guys out. Adam Thielen, to me, don't love him. He's a decent option when needed and called upon. But he's not a guy that I'm looking to punch in your lineup here. Mike Williams, still avoiding. With Keenan Allen coming back, he comes more volatile. He's kind of that deep threat, that target guy that he has to make the catch. If he doesn't, he has a bad week. He doesn't find the end zone. Bad week. Keenan Allen, I think, is going to see the majority of the share if both of them return. So, and you're not going to know until too late there. I guess you could play it in this way. If you like Williams, D-Hop plays on Monday night. So, I'm right about that, right? I think so. Let me double check that. Yeah, okay. For some reason I thought I was wrong. But D-Hop is playing Monday night, so if you wanted to, you could see if Keenan Allen's ruled out, then I would maybe pivot to Mike Williams on Sunday Night Football over D-Hop. But definitely plug in Patterson, Boyd, and then play that game with D-Hop and Williams, whichever route you want to go. Alrighty. No, I'll be really sad if Singletary goes off today. Called it last week, and then now this week I'm not in on him, so maybe I'll be right. Who knows? You are welcome. Let's see here. Where was I going? Oh, here we go. All right. So players that FTN likes a little bit more than the ECR this week. We're going to roll through this pretty quick here before we get out of here. Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Herbert. 3 quarterbacks that we liked a little bit higher than the rest. Justin Herbert was only 1 spot. We kind of had him only 1 spot higher. We had him at 7 over 8. Jalen Hurts, we have at 2. Probably on the back of my ranking. I have Jalen Hurts pretty high. I think he has a pretty big day, good bounce back week this week. I think he's a top 3 option, as well as our FTN rankers. We have him at 2. Kyler Murray, we have at 9. The ECR is at 18. It's probably injury based. A lot of times when you see the ECR with these lower guys, it's because they're expecting him not to play on Monday Night Football. The ECR, it's tough to put a guy that high. Just because if he doesn't play, it hurts you pretty bad. So that's most likely the route there. Playing on Monday Night Football, that's the big difference. So not going to see that change, but players we liked a little bit less. Daniel Jones, we have him almost outside the top 12. D-Shar has him at 9. I still like Daniel Jones a little better, but the rest of the rankers at FTN not in on him as much. Josh Allen, we actually have 1 spot lower. We have him at 3 instead of 2. Again, a guy that I honestly have a little bit lower. I don't see him. A lot of people, it's hard to not rank him 1. I didn't last week because I didn't expect that out of him. I don't expect it again this week. I just don't. I think they're going to shelter his elbow a little bit. You're not going to see as much running. They're not going to necessarily throw as much. And he's struggling right now. The interceptions are there. They're adding up. And they're in the red zone. So you're not seeing that touchdown production from him. Still a top 5 option. Still a top 12 option. I'm not pivoting away from him. It's just not a guy that I'm necessarily think could be the top slot this week. Justin Fields, a guy that I have pretty high, but the rest of the F10 rankers don't. We have him at 4. D-Shar has him at 3. Marcus Mariota is a guy that we don't like as much. We have him outside the top 15. D-Shar has him inside it. Running backs. So, Rakers, we like a little bit more. Deontay Foreman, a guy that I've talked a little bit down on this week. But the FTN rankers, we like them. They have him at 19 over 23. So, Nick Chubb, we have a guy that we like a little bit more, 7 versus 10. And I endorse this message. I think Nick Chubb could have a pretty big day against the Bills. So, I'm in on that. I like that. Brian Robinson, we have a little bit higher, as well as Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards obviously inactive, so that's irrelevant. But Brian Robinson, a guy that we like. We have him as a 24 top running back 2. ECR does not. Damian Pierce, we actually have as a running back 1. The ECR does not. Miles Sanders, we have him as a top 15 option. The ECR has him outside it. Michael Carter, another guy we have a little bit higher, 27 over 28. Melvin Gordon, too. If you're really looking deep in the flexes, we have him a little bit higher. We don't like as much as Cordell Patterson. They have our FTN rankings have 21. I actually have them pretty high, so I'm probably the one that's holding that at 21. But yeah, CPAT's guy we don't necessarily like as much. Austin Eckler, we have a little bit lower. Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook. We all have those guys one spot lower. Obviously, largely in part because we have Nick Chubb a little bit higher. It kind of pushes all these guys down. All still within running back 1s for that list there. So nothing crazy. Don't not start these guys, but just something to note. Players we like a little bit more. Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, Curtis Samuel, and Drake London. We all have 2 spots higher than the ECR. Wilson and Mooney are 2 top 24 options. The ECR is a little bit more fringy on those guys. The other 2 just 2 spots higher. Nothing crazy there. The biggest difference that we like less, our FTN rankers actually are not as in on Kadarius Toney as I am. We have him at 35. The ECR has him at 28. Now, this was written Friday, so it could be a little bit different if you check out our website and or the ECR, but it was a 7-spot difference. Pretty big, pretty drastic. Cortland Sutton also is a guy that the FTN rankers don't like as much. They have him at 18. ECR had him at 13, so anybody who asks about Sutton, it's not just me that necessarily likes him, but the ECR really likes Cortland Sutton this week, just because probably the volume. So we like him not as much. So I'm still starting him. I'm not expecting that big week from Cortland Sutton. Tyler Boyd is a guy we have a little bit less. He's at 14, but the ECR is at 12. So, I mean, he's a pretty popular guy also this week. But we have him a little bit lower. Rondell Moore is a guy that we have lower as well, and Josh Palmer. Obviously, 2 guys with some guys coming back off of injuries, most likely could see a little bit of a role decrease. Let's see. Tight end, it's pretty chalk when it comes to that. Gerald Everett was a guy that we have a little bit. I mean, it was 12 spots higher, but again, it's a guy that's coming off of injury. So the ECR, when you have injuries, you tend to see some of these guys that are coming off injury be ranked a lot lower, just because if they don't play the ECR, you're not allowed to edit it once the week starts at the 1:00 window. So Gerald Everett lower is more of a strategic plan, probably in the ECR, but our FTN rankers had him at 12. If he plays, I think he could have a decent week. Tight end to get to 12 is not hard, so I could see that happening. Outside of that, pretty chalk, like I said, nothing crazy. Everybody within a spot. Like I said, it's a pretty cool article. I mean, it's not long, pretty easy read. Kind of gives you a little bit of an insight on the rankings to see if you want to, like I mentioned earlier, subscribe to the FTN site where you can have full access to all of our rankings from Jeff Radcliffe, Adam Pfeiffer, myself, Tyler Lochner, Scott Spratt, Chris Meany. The list goes on. We all do half PPR rankings. Pretty easy to the ECR. We get those up usually Tuesday, Wednesday, and it gives you a little bit of a head start there, where the ECR tends to be a little bit later in the week. If you do want to sign up, use promo code POPE, P-O-P-E, gets you 20% off the subscription. On top of that, you get access to all of our stats. I mean, we have some great tools. Stats Hub gives you basically every advanced stat you could possibly want. We have a quarterback stats tool. We have team defense tools, player utilization, pressure reports, points to position, snap reports, volume report, red zone report, weather tool, you name it. You want the tool, we pretty much have it. And you get that whole access with the whole plan. So on top of that, you get a Discord chat. You get to talk to people like Radcliffe, myself. If you're into DFS, we have all of that stuff. Everything, the subscription covers most of all of that. So go ahead, sign up if you want. If not, I will see you guys and ladies next Sunday, same time, same place. Good luck, and till next week. Adios.